Welcome back, everyone, to Yahoo Finance. Just a recap of how the markets closed today. It was red across the board. As we can see, it was the S&P there down by 2.95%. The Dow dropping nearly 800 points today. And the Nasdaq, the biggest loser on the day, dropping 3.6%. A tough day all around.
Well, as West Texas Intermediate touched $130 a barrel today, Brent crude was just shy of $140 a barrel at the day's high. The national average, meanwhile, for gas has surpassed $4.14, striking above the previous record of $4.11. Joining us now with much more, we've got Tom Kloza, who is the OPIS Global Head of Energy Analysis. Great to have you here with us today. The significance of today's unfortunate milestone of this new high for gas from your perspective?
Well, when you adjust it for inflation, it's not as bad as it might appear. You know, the banks will tell you that you'd have to be about 520 or 525 when you adjust for inflation from 2008. But I got to tell you, gasoline is different. People have a visceral reaction to higher prices. And once it had a four handle, or once it has a four handle, they act a little bit differently and their behavior changes. And in California, you know, it's probably above 520 now and they act differently. And the other problem is beyond the crude oil numbers, diesel is absolutely going ballistic. And you may not care about it if you don't drive an upscale diesel vehicle, but it infiltrates every nook and cranny of inflation. And it's going to drive inflation, you know, through fuel surcharges pretty much across all 50 states and really across the world right now.
And so with what we're watching in the geopolitical conflict and how that's playing out, and certainly having a major outsized impact on this most recent leg higher that we've seen in WTI and Brent particularly, what do you expect for the White House's reaction to be as they've increasingly discussed and considered the impact of a U.S. ban on imports of Russian oil?
I think the U.S. ban at this point will largely be ceremonial, but it makes sense not to fund Vladimir Putin with dollars or other currencies from Europe. Here's the problem. We don't really depend on Russia for a lot of our oil. You know, it's less than 3%. Canada, Mexico, that's where we need the oil, and maybe a rapprochement with Venezuela will bring back the oil. Europe is the problem. Europe is desperate for Russian oil. And we don't know exactly how much Russian oil has been impeded or is not leaving Russia, but we know it's probably 3 or 4 million barrels a day of crude oil and refined products. And a substantial amount of natural gas. That's driven natural gas prices in Europe to the equivalent of $350 or $400 a barrel. So Europe is really, really hurting right now. I suspect that we may enact a formal ban, but there's really a de facto ban right now because companies and countries, perhaps with the exception of Germany and certainly China, they're regarding anything from Russia as having a scarlet letter attached to it. So I think it's hurting the Russian economy desperately, but it's not exactly an open society, so we don't know how badly it's hurting them.
Tom, perhaps you can put in perspective for us the percentage of kind of jet fuel that is actually purchased from Russia versus some of the other sources that you were mentioning a moment ago, and what that threat to post-pandemic travel would look like.
Well, we don't import much jet fuel from Russia. We import traditionally some crude and unfinished oil. Some of the Russian refineries are not very sophisticated, so they can't make high-grade and EPA-friendly specifications of gasoline and diesel. So again, I don't think we desperately need the Russian crude oil. We can make adjustments to that. It's the Russian fuel, the Russian natural gas, the Russian gasoline, and the Russian, they call it gas oil, but it's diesel, that Europe desperately needs. And it's the notion that even before Ukraine, we were probably using more oil as a planet than we were producing, and we were drawing down inventories. Now it's a question of how fast are they drawing down. So there's a lot of banks that are putting numbers out there that look to be kind of bizarre or burlesque a while ago, $150 or $180. But I think everything is in play. I think that probably what the banks get wrong is the reaction of consumers. Consumers are looking at widespread inflation. There's a lot of blame, and unfortunately, it's on the Biden administration when this is not their doing. And consumers are lashing out. And sometimes they lash out by not driving as much or not taking vacations or not engaging in the conspicuous consumption that the economy has come to depend on.
Tom, just lastly, while we have you here, we do have, of course, Lukoil that has locations across a good number of states. With that in mind, this is, of course, a company that has direct ties to Russia. It also has a franchisee model. What do you anticipate as you're already seeing some of the boycotts being initiated by customers not buying from Lukoil, and then additionally even states looking across some of these franchised locations, I'll add, to figure out what measures they can even take in condemnation of anything that's annexed to Russia right now?
You know, I had a lot of Lukoil stations up in New Jersey when I lived there. And to a certain extent, it was always a puzzling brand. I mean, you wouldn't use the brand Stalin, for your gasoline. And to a certain extent, it's a Putin brand right now. That's unfortunate. And because Lukoil and its parent company have been one of the few Russian companies to sort of disavow any connection with Putin and to call for the retreat from Ukraine. So unfortunately, it's the little guy, franchisees and the people that work in the Lukoil stores that are going to be penalized by this. On the other hand, it's, there's a lot of aggregation going on in the C-store business and with gas stations. As hot as the home real estate market is, owning gas stations and the market for selling gas stations is hotter than it's ever been in my career. So it wouldn't surprise me if, it's just a tiny, tiny portion of the Lukoil empire. It wouldn't surprise me if they find a good buyer, and it gets rebranded as something else that's appreciated by the public.